Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So a lot of you have been emailing me about the Restrict Act. It looks like this is Congressional Bill 686, Senate Bill 686. So I don't know if this is actually really bad or really good or just right. And honestly, I don't really want to rely on the news's coverage of it. When it comes to stuff like this, I'd much rather read the actual bill. Now, I just took a look at it and I noticed that this bill is 55 pages, but it's not a real 55 pages. It's the kind of 55 pages you have when your teacher tells you that you have to do a 55-page book report. So you make the margins like 3 inches on the paper, and you have a bunch of shit that's in size 48 or 72 font, and you waste all the space up here. So this is technically 55 pages, but not really. So I'm going to get into it, and we're going to read the entire thing and see what it is. See how this bill is. Is this bill actually worse than the Patriot Act? Or are people being melodramatic? I'm not going to be reading donations aloud throughout this stream because I am a noob. I don't have a dual monitor setup, and so I actually have to minimize OBS if I'm going to read the screen. Yes, that's right. 10 years on YouTube, don't have a dual monitor setup. I am a cheapskate. I am a noob. So I'm just going to shrink my windows around so that they all fit in over here, and you can read the bill with me on the screen. And we'll get started. So let me just shrink myself a little bit because I'm kind of in the way. We can be very small in the corner there. So this is 118th Congress, first session, to authorize the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries and for other purposes in the Senate of the United States. And you have just a list of random people over here. I don't really care about that. A bill to authorize the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries, and for other purposes, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats that Risk Information and Communications Technology Act, or the Restrict Act. Section 2, definitions. In this act, classified national security information. The term classified national security information means information that has been determined pursuant to Executive Order 13526, 50 U.S.C. 3161, note related to classified national security information. So one thing I'm kind of curious about before we even get into this act is, what is this? Okay, so this is an executive order for classifying, safeguarding, and declassifying national security stuff, okay? Relating to classified national security information or any predecessor or successor order to require protection against unauthorized disclosure and is marked to indicate such classified information or such classified status in documentary form. 2. Controlling holding. The term controlling holding means a holding with the power, whether direct or indirect, and whether exercised or not exercised, to determine, direct, or decide important matters in affecting an entity. Covered holding. The term covered holding, A, means regardless of how or when such holding was or will be obtained or otherwise come to have been held, a controlling holding held directly or indirectly in an ICTS covered holding entity by a foreign adversary, an entity subject to the jurisdiction of, or under the laws of a foreign adversary. Okay, again, we have a no acronym rule here. So what is ICTS? It's a Dutch firm. Okay, I don't know. Is that real? What is this? ICTS International. Okay, I don't really know the point of that, but continue onwards. 3, an entity owned, directed, or controlled by an entity described in the subparagraphs 1 and 2, or B, includes any other holding, the structure of which is designed or intended to evade or circumvent the application of this act, subject to regulations prescribed by the Secretary. 4, covered transaction. In general, the term covered transaction means a transaction in which an entity described in subparagraph B has any interest, including through an interest in a contract for the provision of technology or service, or any class of such transactions. Covered entities. The entities described in the subparagraph are 1, a foreign adversary, 2, an entity subject to the jurisdiction of or organized under the laws of a foreign adversary, and 3, an entity owned, directed, or controlled by a person described in subparagraph A or B. C, non-evasion. The term covered transaction includes any other transaction, the structure of which is designed or intended to evade or circumvent the application of this act, subject to regulations prescribed by the Secretary. D, timing. The term covered transaction includes a current, past, or potential future transaction. So what I'm kind of curious about when it comes to this is, does the timingness over here mean that you can get in trouble after this law is passed for something that you've already done. Again, this is all in seriously confusing legalese. So if anybody here is a lawyer, I would be very curious for your input. Critical infrastructure. The term critical infrastructure has the meaning given the term in Section 1016E of the U.S. Patriot Act. Okay, so that's kind of scary because you're citing the Patriot Act in this, and the Patriot Act is a steaming pile of garbage. So that's not good. Okay, so let's see. When you say the meaning given to it in Section 1016E. Okay, what's 1016E? Where do I find 1016E in here? Okay, 1016, critical infrastructure defined. In this section, the term critical infrastructure means systems and assets, whether physical or virtual, so vital to the United States that the incapacity or destruction of systems and assets would have a debilitating impact on security, national economic security, national public health, or safety, or any combination of these matters. Okay, let's just be clear here. The term critical infrastructure has the meaning given in term 1016E of the Patriot Act. So something so vital to the U.S. that the incapacity or destruction of the system or asset would have a debilitating impact on security, national economic security, national public health, or safety. So this is kind of this kind of definition is like a lot of, okay, what is a national public health risk? We learned in 2020 to 2021. That's a very subjective thing. Debilitating impact on security. I mean, people are saying that, like you have people that try to say that Signal needs to not be encrypted for the kids. Yeah. Entity. The term entity means any of the following, whether established in the United States or outside of the United States. A firm. B, a government agency, government department, or government commission. C, a labor union. D, a fraternal or social organization. E, a partnership. F, a trust. G, a joint venture. H, a corporation. I, a group, subgroup, or other association or organization, whether or not organized for profit. 7, executive department and agency. The term executive department and agency has the meaning given the term executive agency in Section 105 of Title V, United States Code. 8, foreign adversary. The term foreign adversary, A, means any foreign government or regime determined by the Secretary pursuant to Sections 3 and 5 to have engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. And B, includes, unless removed by the Secretary pursuant to Section 6, 1, the People's Republic of China, including the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Mako Special Administrative Region. 2, the Republic of Cuba. 3, the Islamic Republic of Iran. 4, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Why is it the more you have the stuff in front of it, the less democratic and People's Republic it is? 5, the Russian Federation. 6, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela under the regime of Nicolas Maduro. 9, holding. The term holding, A, means 1, an equity interest. 2, a stock. 3, a security. 4, a share. 5, a partnership interest. 6, an interest in a limited liability company. 7, a membership interest. Or 8, any participation, right, or other equivalent, however designated, and of any character. And B, includes without limitation any security convertible into an ownership interest and right, warrant, or option to acquire ownership interests. 10, ICTS covered holding entity. The term ICTS covered holding entity means any entity that A, owns or controls or manages information and communications technology products or services, and B, 1, has not less than 1 million United States-based annual active users at any point during the year period preceding the date on which the covered holding is referred to the President, or 2, for which more than 1 million units have been sold to persons in the United States before the date on which the covered holding is referred to the President. 11, information and communications technology products or services. The term information and communications technology products or services means any hardware, software, or other product or service primarily intended to fulfill or enable the function of information or data processing, storage, retrieval, or communication by electronic means, including transmission, storage, and display. 12, mitigation measure. The term mitigation measure means a measure agreed to in an agreement between any relevant party and the federal government, or ordered by the federal government, and of which any relevant party has been notified in any manner addressed under this act to address any risk arising from a covered transaction or associated with a covered holding, 13. Person. The term person means a natural person, including a citizen or national of the United States or of any foreign country. 14. Relevant executive department and agency heads. The term relevant executive department and agency heads means A. The Secretary of the Treasury, B. The Secretary of State, C. The Secretary of Defense, D. The Attorney General, E. The Secretary of Homeland Security, F. The United States Trade Representative, G. The Director of National Intelligence, H. The Administrator of General Services, I. The Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, and J. The heads of the other executive departments and agencies as appropriate. 15. Relevant committees of Congress. The term relevant committees of Congress means A. The Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, the Committee on the Judiciary, the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, the Committee on Foreign Relations, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on Rules and Administration, and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate, and B. The Committee on Energy and Commerce, the Committee on the Judiciary, the Committee on Homeland Security, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on House Administration, and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives. 16. Secretary. The term secretary means Secretary of Commerce. 17. Transaction. The term transaction means any acquisition, importation, transfer, installation, dealing in, or use of any information communications technology product or service, including ongoing activities such as managed services, data transmission, software updates, repairs, or the provision of data hosting services, or a class of such transactions. Section 3. Addressing information and communication technology products and services that pose undue or unacceptable risk. A. In general, the Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, is authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate, including by negotiating, entering into, or imposing and enforcing any mitigation measure to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. The Secretary determines: 1. Poses an undue or unacceptable risk of A. Sabotage or subversion of the design, integrity, manufacturing, production, distribution, installation, operation, or maintenance of information and communications technology products and services in the United States. B. Catastrophic effects on the security or resilience of critical infrastructure or digital economy of the United States. Remember, critical infrastructure is defined by the Patriot Act. So critical infrastructure can mean... Critical infrastructure is broadly defined here. Pretty broadly defined here. And when you talk about covered transaction, let's just go back to covered transaction over here on page 10. Okay, so covered transaction means a transaction which an entity describes in subparagraph B has any interest, including through an interest in a contract for the provision of technology or service or any such class of transactions. So provision of the technology or services. So a covered transaction can essentially, again, if you're a lawyer, please correct me if I go astray here, but I do believe that sounds like if you have if you like you're hosting a website. So like a covered transaction in this case could literally be that you host a website. Okay, so getting back to where we are here, give me a moment. Getting back to where we were, since I did not leave a bookmark because I don't know how to do that in Brave browser when I'm reading a PDF. I should learn how to use PDF readers properly. It's one of the things you really should learn when you become an adult. So, going back here. So, in general, the Secretary, in consultation with the relevant department and agency heads, is authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate, including by negotiating or entering into or imposing and enforcing any mitigation measure to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that the Secretary determines. Poses an undue or unacceptable risk of sabotage or subversion of design, integrity, manufacturing, production, distribution, installation, operation, or maintenance of information and communications technology products and services in the United States. Now, do keep in mind, part of this also talks about economic security. So we're talking about economic security. I mean, like, you know, some of the top companies in the S&P 500 are direct competitors to TikTok. And just subversion of that. I mean, like, would it be possible? Yeah, so somebody in the chat says a covered transaction is a packet sent to somewhere you don't want to send it. A covered transaction is any packet sent to somewhere they don't want you to send it. Pretty much. Again, when you're talking about this, like when you talk about critical infrastructure defined, national economic security, I mean, again, some of the biggest stocks in the S&P 500 are direct competitors to TikTok. And to be clear, I think TikTok is a steaming pile of garbage. I have used TikTok 3 times in my life, and when I did, I used it with Tor browser because hell if I'm letting that get anywhere near, I'm not installing that piece of crap spyware on my phone. I went through all this effort to try and slowly wring Google out of my life. I'm going to install TikTok? No way in hell. To be clear, I'm not on TikTok's side here, but this is not a ban TikTok bill. This is a let me screw with anything that I want bill. And, again, here the secretary is the Secretary of Commerce. So the Secretary of Commerce has a lot of jurisdiction to be able to just decide, I don't like this, get rid of it. Okay, interfering in or altering the result or reported result of a federal election. Oh, okay, again, when it comes to election interference, you had, again, like, I'm not even, oh my God, okay, oh dear God, okay. In 2016, we had, again, like, to be clear, I've read a lot about it, and like I get it. When you have ads that are paid for in rubles that are saying that Blue Lives Matter protests should show up here, and then Black Lives Matter protests should show up here, and you're asking these two groups of people that have diametrically opposed political viewpoints to show up to the same place at the same time. They don't like each other. I get how that's just like trying to cause trouble, and it's funny how a lot of these ads wind up getting paid for in rubles. Like, I get it. Sometimes that stuff has a point. There's also times where this is just massive cope, where it's, somebody put up an ad that like makes fun of a politician. Like, I don't know. Like, there are a lot of times where there are political ads that get put up that are just designed to screw with people and cause chaos. There are political ads that are outright BS lies. There are ads that we disagree with. How do I put this? You see all the, like, there was so much cope in 2016. There was even more cope, dare I say it, in 2020, still up to today. There are a lot of people that are yelling about interference in federal elections, what qualifies as interference in federal elections. This is going to be a crap show, to be honest with you. This is going to be an absolute and utter crap show. So, interfering in or altering the result or reported result of a federal election as determined in coordination with the Attorney General, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Federal Election Commission. So at least it's more than like one person. So it's more like one person can't just yell cope. It has to be like all of these people have to yell cope. It says and, not or. D, coercive or criminal activities by a foreign adversary that are designed to undermine democratic processes and institutions or steer policy and regulatory decisions in favor of the strategic objectives of a foreign adversary to the detriment of the national security of the United States, as determined in coordination with the Attorney General, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Federal Election Commission. Okay, here we go. Now, again, to be clear, I am not saying that I am happy. I'm not saying that I'm happy with other countries going out of their way to try to sway American opinion or to try and sway our laws or our policies one way or another. I believe that, again, we should be the ones deciding our own policy. We should be the ones having the discussion on our policy and so on and so forth. That being said, while it makes me sick to see other people try and stick their dick in our affairs, and I get that we've stuck our dick into other people's affairs over history, a bill that allows this, because again, how often are you undermining a democratic institution, or are you just saying something that is counter to the narrative that's currently being set? That's really important here. And again, this is not a ban TikTok bill. This is again. I just joined and I saw the political garbage in a bill. Yes, you did. And yeah, again, here's the thing. Again, in 2016, we had a lot of people yelling that the election was interfered with by foreign adversaries. And in 2020, you had people that were screaming that the election was rigged because, CNN was posting fake news or whatever. And that's why, there was so many people arguing about so many different things. To actually put it into a bill that we can shut down or mitigate certain aspects of the internet related to it, this is scary. And we have enough information. We are at a time that is politically charged enough that you bet your ass that this is going to be misused. The Patriot Act was passed when I was 15 years old. I was not smart enough when I was 15 to really be politically involved and engaged and understand that this is something that was really bad, that was going to screw us in a very bad way. And even if I was politically engaged, I didn't have a YouTube channel back then. It's not like I had any money or clout or anything back then. And even now, to be honest with you, I don't really have that. But, there are so many ways that the Patriot Act has destroyed our Fourth Amendment rights in ways that were never thought imaginable by so many people when it was initially presented. There were a lot of people warning us about it, but a lot of the general public really just didn't care. It's like, yeah, it's got the terrorists. And right now, again, to be clear, there's a lot of reason to hate TikTok. Again, when I have used TikTok 3 times in my life because somebody sent me something from it. I opened that shit in Tor browser because I'm not giving them access to anything. I'm not opening that in my normal browser. I'm not opening that I'm not installing TikTok on my phone. I think TikTok is trash. And I wouldn't be mad with the idea of banning TikTok. But this has a lot of potential to do a lot more than just ban TikTok. These provisions are going to screw with us for the next 20 to 50 years if this steaming pile of garbage is passed in its current form. Continuing. 2. Otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of United States persons. B. Procedure. 1. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, shall review any transaction described in subsection A. To A, determine, not later than 180 days after the date in which the Secretary initiates such review, if such transaction poses an undue or unacceptable risk under subsection A2 and qualifies as a covered transaction, and B, with respect to a transaction found to pose an undue or unacceptable risk and qualify as a covered transaction, determine whether 1, the covered transaction should be prohibited, or 2, any other action should be taken to mitigate the effects of the covered transaction. So again, to be clear, this is not a ban TikTok bill. As Snowchain said, McCarthyism is back. And it doesn't, again, who this is used against is really going to depend on who is in office. Do you want Trump in office being able to actually shut down news channels or newspapers he does not like? Do you want, Hillary Clinton in office being able to say, I don't like these memes getting posted to Facebook? Again, this is dangerous. This gives way too much power. This is, again, and to be clear, you have to have different groups of people agree in order for this to actually get pushed through. But that doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't make me feel better that you need so many different, it doesn't make me feel better that you need 3 or 4 different groups of people to agree to be able to do this. I don't like this. This feels like you're opening the door to McCarthyism in 2023. And I have a strong belief that this is going to be abused by either party that gets into office. I don't trust either of them. With the political temperatures as high as they are in this country right now, I don't trust anybody in here. Now, when you, again, Blue Ford Focus in the chat said that's not what the bill says, though. It's talking about transactions because Blue Ford Focus joined the stream halfway in and did not listen to the section that defines a covered transaction. I read the section defining a covered transaction not once, but twice. And there's a link in the description if you'd like to read that, but you should read the definition section of the bill so you understand what a covered transaction is. Any other action should be taken to mitigate the effects of the covered transaction. 2, published explanations. If practicable and consistent with the national security and law enforcement interests of the United States, in coordination and in cooperation with the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary shall publish information in a declassified form to explain how a covered transaction that the Secretary denied or otherwise mitigated under paragraph 1 meets the criteria established under subsection A or subsection 4A. 3, certain administrative procedure requirements inapplicable. Section 553 of Title V, United States Code, shall not apply to any regulation promulgated pursuant to paragraph 1. Section 4, addressing information and communications technology products and services, holdings that pose undue or unacceptable risk. A, In general, the Secretary shall identify and refer to the President any covered holding that the Secretary determines, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States, or the security and safety of United States persons. B. Procedure. Review and referral. The Secretary shall, by regulation, establish procedures by which the Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, shall a. Conduct reviews of holdings to determine if such holdings constitute covered holdings that pose an undue or unacceptable risk under subsection A, and b. Refer to the President covered holdings that are determined under subsection A to pose an undue or unacceptable risk. 2. Referrals prior to establishment of regulations. At any time preceding the issuance of regulations or establishment of procedures under subparagraph 1, the Secretary may identify and refer to the President a holding determined to be a covered holding under subsection A for any action by the President of the United pursuant to subsection C. If the Secretary, in the sole and unreviewable discretion of the Secretary, determines that such referral would be in the interest of national security. 3. Administrative procedure requirements inapplicable. Subchapter 2 of Chapter 5 and Chapter 7 of Title 5 United States Code, commonly known as the Administrative Procedure Act, shall not apply to any referral by the Secretary to the President of a covered holding. What is this? Subchapter 5 of 7 of Title 5 United States Code. Okay, let's read this. So what is this first? Hello, Melanie 16040, otherwise known as Melanie 2. Okay. What is this? Title 5, Chapter 7. Chapter 5 and Chapter 7. Where is Chapter 5 and Chapter 7? I can't even figure out what chapters are in this, to be honest with you. Let's search for the word chapter. Okay, here we go. This is Chapter 5. Dear God, that's Chapter 5? Subchapter 2 of Chapter 5. Oh, fuck me. This, what the... Okay, I'm not reading a 32-page document. So I wanted to know what this was to understand what it is, but in order to understand this one term in the 55-page document that I want to read, I have to read a 32-page document. So you know what? No, I'm not doing it. Action by the President. 1. In general, subject to Section 13 with respect to any covered holding, referred to the President under subsection A, if the President determines that the covered holding poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of the United States persons. The President may take such action as the President considers appropriate to compel investment of or otherwise mitigate the risk associated with such covered holding to the full extent the covered holding is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, with respect to a. The United States operations, assets, or property of the entity in which the covered holding is held, or of any products or services owned, controlled, designed, developed, manufactured, or supplied by the entity are used in the United States. B. Any tangible or intangible assets, wherever located, are used to support or enable use of the product or software of the entity in the United States. And C. Any data obtained or derived from the product, from use of the product or software entity in the... Okay, wait, okay. In general, subject 17 with respect to any of this, if the President determines the covered holding poses an undue or risk, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so compel divestment of or mitigate the risk associated with... Okay, them... Oh my God, this is like... It's literally like a sentence that never ends. Okay, to mitigate any data obtained or derived from use of the product. Okay, so mitigate the effect of the data obtained or derived from use of the product. Okay, so how do you mitigate that? So let's say, okay, so let's just take something like TikTok. So you can mitigate people being able to get information from TikTok. Non-delegatable authority. The authority to compel divestment of a covered holding under paragraph 1 may only be exercised by the President and may not be delegated to any other individual, except as described in paragraph 4. 3. Announcement. If the President determines that action is required pursuant to paragraph 1, the President shall announce the decision not later than 30 days after the date on which the Secretary refers the covered holding to the President pursuant to subsection A. 4. I don't understand your question, James. That's an acronym. The no acronym rule still applies, even though we're on the live channel. Enforcement of divestment. The President may direct the Attorney General to seek appropriate relief, including divestment relief, in the district courts of the United States in order to implement and enforce this subsection. Section 5. Considerations. A. Priority information in communications technology areas. In carrying out Sections 3 and 4, the Secretary shall prioritize evaluation of 1. Information in communications technology product or services used by a party to a covered transaction in a sector designated as Critical Infrastructure and Policy Directive 21, February 12, 2013, relating to critical infrastructure security and resilience. 2. Software, hardware, or any other product or service integral to telecommunications products and services, including A. Wireless local area networks. B. Mobile networks. C. Satellite payloads. D. Satellite operations and control. You know the answer to that, Blue Ford Focus. You don't have to ask me. E. Cable access points. F. Wireless access points. G. Core networking systems. H. Long, short, and backhaul networks. Or I. Edge computer platforms. 3. Any software, hardware, or any other product or service integral to data hosting or computing service that uses, processes, or retains, or is expected to use, process, or retain sensitive personal data with respect to greater than 1 million persons in the United States at any point during the year, period preceding the date on which the covered transaction is referred to the Secretary for review, or the Secretary initiates review of the covered transaction, including A. Internet hosting services. B. Cloud-based or distributed computing and data storage. C. Machine learning, predictive analytics and data science products and services, including those involving the provision of services to assist a party, utilize, manage, or maintain open source software. D. Managed services. And E. One second. I have a troll I have to get rid of. And he's gone. Did I make a mistake? I don't think I made a mistake. Oh well. 4. Internet or network-enabled sensors, webcams, endpoint surveillance or monitoring devices, modems, and home networking devices. If greater than 1 million units have been sold to persons in the United States at any point during the year preceding the date on which the covered transaction is referred to the Secretary for review, or the Secretary initiates review of the covered transaction. 5. Unmanned vehicles, including drones and other aerial systems, autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicles, or any other product or service integral to the provision, maintenance, or management of such products or services. 6. Software designed or used primarily for connecting with and communicating via the Internet that is in use by greater than 1 million persons in the United States at any point during the year, period preceding the date on which the covered transaction is referred to the Secretary for review, or the Secretary initiates review of the covered transaction. Software used for connecting and communicating via the Internet that is in use by greater than 1 million persons. Unique individuals, or? This is interesting. I'm curious if the language here makes that mean unique. Like, could boards.rossmangroup.com, if I get 1 million views per year, if I get like 80 or 90,000 views a month, if I get 85,000 views a month, do I count if those are, are we talking about actual real people, or are we just talking about page views here? Would I be covered under this? Initiates review of the covered transaction, including A. Desktop applications, B. Mobile applications, C. Gaming applications, D. Payment applications, or E. Web-based applications, or 7. Information and communications technology products and services integral to A. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, B. Quantum key distribution, C. Quantum communications, D. Quantum computing, E. Post-quantum cryptography, F. Autonomous systems, G. Advanced robotics, H. Biotechnology, I. Synthetic biology, J. Computational biology, and Okay, can we just reflect on the fact that a banned TikTok bill is talking about computational biology? Could we just take a second to stop and appreciate that a banned TikTok bill is 55 pages, includes the ability to get rid of, mitigate, or ban access to anything that, quote, interferes in our elections or democratic process, and is talking about quantum computing in computational biology. Can we just stop to appreciate that for a moment? K, e-commerce technology and services, including any electronic techniques for accomplishing business transactions, online retail, internet-enabled logistics, internet-enabled payment technology, and online marketplaces. This bill, they literally threw everything in here. I'm surprised this doesn't mention Mr. Clinton's cat food. Considerations relating to undue and unacceptable risks in determining. Also, by the way, this is something I think is important to go over. You know how when we're trying to pass a right to repair bill, they'll say, this is too broad. I mean, like, this covers all laptops and cell phones. This is way too broad. This bill is bipartisan. The White House has released their endorsement of this bill. This literally, like, what does this not apply to? What does this, again, there's another 36 pages to go over. We have another 36 pages to go in this bill. Like, look at this. Again, the criticism of all the right to repair bills is that, like, it's way too broad. This goes over way too many different devices. Like, bruh, look at this list. Considerations relating to undue and unacceptable risks in determining whether a covered transaction poses an undue or unacceptable risk under Section 3A or 4A, the Secretary shall, as the Secretary determines appropriate and in consultation with the appropriate agency heads, consider, where available, A, any removal or exclusion order issued by the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Defense, or the Director of National Intelligence pursuant to recommendations of the Federal Acquisition Security Council pursuant to Section 1323 of Title 41 United States Code. B, any order or license revocation issued by the Federal Communications Commission with respect to a transacting party, or any consent decree imposed by the Federal Trade Commission with respect to a transacting party. C, any relevant provision of the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation and the Federal Acquisition Regulation and the respective supplements to those regulations. D, any actual or potential threats to the execution of a national critical function identified by the Director of the Cybersecurity Agency, Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The nature, degree, and likelihood of consequence to the public and private sectors of the United States that would occur if vulnerabilities of the information and communications technology services supply chain were to be exploited. And F, any other source of information that the Secretary determines appropriate. And 2, may consider, where available, any relevant threat assessment or report prepared by the Director of National Intelligence completed or conducted at the request of the Secretary. Section 6. Designation of foreign adversaries. In general, 1. Designation. The Secretary may, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence, designate any foreign government or regime as a foreign adversary if the Secretary finds that the foreign government or regime is engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or security of safety of the United States persons. Okay, that part's not horrible. That part's not like the horrible. 2. Removal of designation. The Secretary may, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence, remove the designation of any foreign government or regime as a foreign adversary, including any foreign government or regime identified in Section 2. 8. If the Secretary finds that the foreign government or regime is no longer engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of the conduct significantly adverse to the national or economic security of the United States or security and safety of the United States persons in a manner that would warrant designation as a foreign adversary. B. Notice. Not later than 15 days before the date on which the Secretary makes or removes a designation under subsection A. The Secretary shall, by classified communication, notify the President pro tempore, Majority Leader and Minority Leader of the Senate, the Speaker and the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, and the relevant committees of Congress in writing of the intent to designate a foreign government or regime as a foreign adversary under this section, together with the findings made under subsection A with respect to the foreign government or regime, and the factual basis therefore. Section 7. Resolution of disapproval of designation or removal of designation of a foreign adversary. A. Definition. In this section, 1. The term covered joint resolution means a joint resolution of disapproval or designation of a joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation. What the? That is. Definition 1. In this section, the term covered joint resolution means a joint resolution of disapproval of designation or a joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation. Say that 3 times fast. 2. The term joint resolution or disapproval of designation means a joint resolution, the matter after the resolving clause of which is as follows: that Congress disapproves the designation by the Secretary of Commerce of that country as a foreign adversary for purposes of securing the Information and Communications Technology and Services Supply Chain Act of 2023, and such designation shall have no force or effect under the Secretary of Commerce provides specific evidence to the relevant committees of Congress regarding the removal of designation under Section 6A of that Act, the blank space being appropriately filled in with the name of the foreign person of which the Secretary has designated as a foreign adversary, or for purposes of this Act. And 3. The term joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation means a joint resolution, the matter after the resolving clause of which is as follows: that Congress disapproves the removal of designation by the Secretary of Commerce of this country as a foreign adversary for the purposes of securing the Information and Communications Technology and the Services Supply Chain Act of 2023, and such removal shall have no force or effect until the Secretary of Commerce provides specific evidence to the relevant committees of Congress regarding the removal of designation under Section 6A of that Act, the blank space being appropriately filled in with the name of the foreign government or regime of which the Secretary has removed the designation as a foreign adversary for purposes of this Act. B. Expedited consideration of legislation. Oh, this isn't expedited at all. We only have 55 pages of throwing in the kitchen sink of anything that may have an... So if there's any sort of threat to the economic interest of the United States, like, I don't know, the social media companies competing with TikTok that make up the top companies in the S&P 500, or let's say any sort of interference, again, which is a term that we can see from 2020 and 2016, subjective at best, any sort of interference in the democratic process of the United States, which is essentially just been converted into meaning any sort of political advertising that I don't like. Yeah, let's get this. This is not a ban TikTok bill. Do keep in mind, this is a ban everything bill. This is a ban whatever we want bill. And expedited consideration of legislation. Okay, explain to me why this piece of shit should be just ham-fisted through as fast as possible. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Expedited consideration of legislation. Number 1, initiation. In the event the Secretary designates a foreign government or regime as a foreign adversary, or removes such designation as a foreign adversary, or a joint resolution of disapproval of designation, or a joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation as applicable that is introduced during the 60-day calendar period thereafter shall be entitled to expedited consideration pursuant to the subsection. Okay, so they're not talking about this actual bill getting released fast. They're talking about the ability to expedite having somebody on the list here fast. Thank you. 2. Introduction. During the 60 calendar day period provided for in paragraph 1, a covered joint resolution may be introduced. A. In the Senate, by the majority leader or the designee of majority leader, or the minority leader or the designee of the minority leader. And B. In the House of Representatives, by the Speaker or the minority leader. 3. Floor consideration in House of Representatives. A. Reporting and discharge. If a relevant committee of the House to which a covered joint resolution has been referred has not reported such covered joint resolution within 10 legislative days after the date of referral, that committee shall be discharged from further consideration thereof. B. Proceeding to consideration. Beginning on the 3rd legislative day after each committee to which covered joint resolution has been referred reports the covered joint resolution to the House or has been discharged from further consideration thereof, it shall be in order to move to proceed to consider the covered joint resolution in the House. All points of order against the motion are waived. Such a motion shall not be in order after the House has disposed of a motion to proceed on the covered joint resolution with regard to the same agreement. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the motion to its adoption without intervening motion. The motion shall not be debatable. A motion to reconsider the vote by which the motion is disposed of shall not be in order. Consideration. The covered joint resolution shall be considered as read. All points of order against the covered joint resolution and against its consideration are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the covered joint resolution to final passage without intervening motion except 2 hours of debate equally divided and controlled by the sponsor of the covered joint resolution or designee and an opponent. A motion to reconsider the vote on passage of the covered joint resolution shall not be in order. 4. Consideration in the Senate. A. Committee referral. A covered joint resolution introduced in the Senate shall be referred to the relevant committees of the Senate. B. Reporting and discharge. If a relevant committee of the Senate has not reported such covered joint resolution within 10 session days after the date of referral of such legislation, that committee shall be discharged from further consideration of such legislation, and the covered joint resolution shall be placed in the appropriate calendar. C. Proceeding to the consideration. Notwithstanding Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, it is in order at any time after each committee authorized to consider covered joint resolution reports to the Senate or has been discharged from its consideration, even though a previous motion to the same effect has been agreed to move to proceed to the consideration of the covered joint resolution, and all points of order against covered joint resolution and against consideration of the covered joint resolution are waived. The motion to proceed is not debatable. The motion is not subject to a motion to postpone. A motion to reconsider the vote by which the motion is agreed to or disagreed to shall not be in order. If a motion to proceed to the consideration of the covered joint resolution is agreed to, the covered joint resolution shall remain the unfinished business until disposed of. D. Debate. Debate on covered joint resolution and all debatable motions and appeals in connection therewith shall be limited to not more than 10 hours, which shall be divided equally between the majority and minority leaders or their designees. A motion to further limit debate is in order and is not debatable. A motion to further limit debate is in order and not debatable. Okay, so saying no to debate is not debatable. I guess at least they're consistent. An amendment to or a motion to postpone, or a motion to proceed to the consideration of other business, or a motion to recommit the covered joint resolution is not in order. E. Vote on passage. The vote on passage shall occur immediately following the conclusion of the debate on the covered joint resolution in a single quorum call at the conclusion of the debate, if requested in accordance with the rules of the Senate. F. Rulings of the chair on procedure. Appeals from the decisions of the chair relating to the application of the rules of the Senate as the case may be, to the procedure relating to the covered joint resolution shall be decided without debate. G. Consideration of veto messages. Debate in the Senate of any veto message with respect to a covered joint resolution, including all debatable motions, and appeals in connection with such covered joint resolution shall be limited to 10 hours, to be equally divided between and controlled by the majority leader and the minority leader or their designees. 5. Rules relating to Senate and House of Representatives. A. Coordination with action by other House. If, before the passage by one House of a covered joint resolution of that House receives a covered joint resolution from the other House, then the following procedure shall apply. 1. The covered joint resolution of the other House shall not be referred to a committee. 2. With respect to covered joint resolution of the House receiving the legislation, 1. The procedure in that House shall be the same as if no covered joint resolution had been received from the other House, but 2. The vote on passage shall be on the covered joint resolution of the other House. B. Treatment of a covered joint resolution of other House. If one House fails to introduce a covered joint resolution under this section, the covered joint resolution of the other House shall be entitled to expedited floor procedures under this section. C. Treatment of companion measures. If, following passage of the covered joint resolution in the Senate then receives a companion measure from the House of Representatives, the companion measure shall not be debatable. C. Rules of Senate and House of Representatives. Subsection B is enacted by Congress, 1. As an exercise of the rulemaking power of the Senate and the House of Representatives, respectively, and as such are deemed a part of the rules of each House, respectively, but applicable only with respect to the procedure to be followed in that House in the case of legislation described in those sections, and supersede other rules only to the extent that they are inconsistent with such rules. And 2. With full recognition of the constitutional right of either House to change the rules so far as relating to the procedure of that House, at any time, in the same manner, and to the same extent as in the case of any other rule of that House. D. Effect of the covered joint resolution. 1. Joint resolutions of disapproval of designation. A joint resolution of disapproval of designation that is enacted in accordance with this session shall remove the designation as a foreign adversary of a foreign government or regime that is subject to the joint resolution of disapproval of designation for the purposes of this act. 2. Joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation. A joint resolution of disapproval of removal of designation that is enacted in accordance with this section shall prohibit the removal of designation as a foreign adversary of a foreign government or regime that is subject to the joint resolution of disapproval or removal of designation for purposes of this act. Section 8. Implementing authorities. A. Regulations. In carrying out the responsibilities under this Act, the Secretary may establish such rules, regulations, and procedures as the Secretary considers appropriate. B. Classes of transactions. In conducting reviews, promulgating regulations, implementing prohibitions, or other mitigation measures, or otherwise carrying out the responsibilities under this Act, the Secretary may take action with respect to both individual covered transactions and classes of covered transactions. C. Offer other authorities. 1. In general, the Secretary may issue guidance, including advisory opinions and establish procedures to carry out this Act. 2. List of foreign persons. The Secretary may create lists of foreign persons that may be subject to prohibitions or restrictions and related mechanisms to revise and update such lists periodically. 3. Additional authority. The Secretary may undertake any other action as necessary to carry out the responsibilities under this Act that is not otherwise prohibited by law. 4. Advisory committees. The Secretary may appoint technical advisory committees to advise the Secretary in carrying out the responsibilities under this Act. Chapter 10 of Part 1 and Title 5 of United States Code shall not apply to any meeting such as an advisory meeting held pursuant to this subsection. Okay, so Chapter 10 of Part 1 of Title 5. Chapter 10, Part 1, what? Title 5. Chapter 10, Part 1, Title 5. Chapter 10, Part 1, Title 5. Chapter 10, Part 1, Title 5. Chapter 1. Wait, of what? Chapter 10 of Part 1 of Title 5, United States Code. Of what? Where do I find this? I'm sorry, I'm fucking dead right now. I'm dead tired. Okay, Federal Advisory Committee. So what are we talking about here? What does not apply? So it says Chapter 10 of Part 1 of Title 5. Chapter 10, Part 1. Where are parts? Okay, so this is Title 5. Chapter 10. Where's Part 1? Where's Part 1? Where's Part 1? Let's just search for the word part by itself. Part 1. No. You're fucking with me. I'm not reading this. I have to read this to understand that? What the Yo. Okay, this is talking about lobbyists being able to serve in government positions related to their prior lobbying activities. The Secretary may appoint technical advisory committees to advise the Secretary in carrying out responsibilities. So the whole point of this Wait a second. My administration is committed to reducing the undue influence of special interests that for too long have shaped the national agenda and drowned out the voices of ordinary Americans. Special interests exert disproportionate influence in part by relying on lobbyists who have special access that is not available to all citizens. Although lobbyists can sometimes play a constructive role by communicating information to the government, their service and privileged positions within the executive branch can perpetuate the culture of special interest access that I am committed to changing. This places limitations on the ability of lobbyists to serve in government positions of their prior. So essentially, this is. So. Okay, now this is starting to fucking make sense, bro. Now this is starting to fucking make sense. Okay, check. Mind blown. Okay, I'm getting it now. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out. This is starting to make sense. So, TikTok. Again, to be clear, and let's just be clear because somebody's going to misquote me in the comments because people on YouTube are just shitty. I think TikTok is trash. I have no problem with banning TikTok. I get it. Anytime I've ever used TikTok in my life, it has been through Tor browser because I have no trust for these people. That being said, the companies, so okay, you know how in New York State they had lobbyists write the law, like the right to repair law that got rewritten by Samsung and Apple lobbyists for TechNet. Remember that? That's a problem. So the whole idea that like lobbyists get to work within the government, lobbyists get to serve on advisory committees, lobbyists get to write the law. So a lobbyist or a special interest for an existing social media company gets to be on an advisory committee that is advising the government on what social networks or websites to ban. Let that sink in for a second. Like let's just let that sink in. Again, with TikTok, yes, they're pieces of shit, but at the end of the day, TikTok's who are their competitors when it comes to ad revenue, when it comes to eyeballs? Their competitors are Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Obviously, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube lobbyists are going to have an incentive structure to say, you know what? Yeah, they are a bad adversary. They're bad for the United States. You got to ban them. And to be clear, when it comes to TikTok, 100%. I agree with banning TikTok. Do I agree with just ignoring this section of United States code that specifically seeks to limit the... Do I agree with just ignoring this section of United States code that was passed that tries to limit the effect that lobbyists and special interests have on creating legislation for the United States? Like, no. Because you know exactly how this is going to work. You're going to have lobbyists for Google and Meta and like just showing up and saying, hey, man, you know, this social media network, yeah, they seem to be trying to screw with elections. They seem to be kind of trying to undermine the United States, if you know what I'm saying. You know, we should probably get rid of them. Oh, by the way, you know, I spent the last 5 years getting paid $80 million from Facebook. And like, you see where this is going. Like, again, and to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. I am a MacBook repairman, and I am pulling this out of my ass at 1 a.m. in a chair that got scratched up by a cat. But like, this language is clear as day over here. It literally, it's written right in the bill. Like, to advise the Secretary in carrying out the responsibilities, Chapter 10 of Part 1 of Title 5 of United States Code shall not apply to any meeting of such advisory committee. And what is the purpose of that? The entire purpose of that is to reduce the undue influence of special interests and lobbyists. That's not going to get abused at all. This is so much more than a banned TikTok bill. This is so much more than a banned TikTok bill, and I hope people understand that. Section 9. Information to be furnished. A. In general, the Secretary may require any party to a transaction or holding under review or investigation pursuant to this act to furnish under oath, in the form of reports or otherwise, at any time as may be required by the Secretary, complete information relative to any act, transaction, or holding subject to the provisions of this act. B. Authority. In carrying out this act, the Secretary may 1. Require that information or reports required to be submitted under subsection A to include the production of any documents relating to any act, transaction, or property relating to a transaction or holding under review or investigation. 2. Require information or reports required to be submitted under subsection A before, during, or after consummation of a transaction or holding under review or investigation. 3. Conduct investigations, hold hearings, administer oaths, examine witnesses, receive evidence, take depositions, and require by subpoena the attendance and testimony of witnesses and the production of any documents relating to the transaction holding under review or investigation, regardless of whether any report has been required or filed in connection wherewith, including through another person or agency. C. Format. Any person producing any document to the Secretary pursuant to this section shall produce the document in a form usable to the Department of Commerce, which may be detailed in the request for documentation, or documents or otherwise agreed to by parties. D. Confidentiality and disclosure of information. 1. In general, subject to paragraph 2, any information or document not otherwise publicly or commercially available that has been submitted to the Secretary under this Act shall not be released publicly except to the extent required by federal law. 2. Disclosure. Notwithstanding paragraph 1, the Secretary may disclose information or documents that are not otherwise publicly or commercially available in the following circumstances. A. Pursuant to administrative or judicial proceeding, including any judicial review under Section 12, B, pursuant to an act of Congress, C, pursuant to a request from a relevant committee of Congress, D, pursuant to a request from any federal, state, or local governmental entity, or to any foreign governmental entity of the United States ally or partner, if such request is important to the national security analysis or actions of the Secretary, but only to the extent necessary for national security purposes, and subject to appropriate confidentiality and classification requirements. E, if any party to whom the information or documents pertain consents to such disclosure. F, if the Secretary determines in the sole and unreviewable discretion of the Secretary that the release of such information is in the national interest of the United States. G, any other purpose authorized by federal law. Section 10, enforcement. A, investigations. 1. In general, the President shall rely on, including by delegation, the Secretary and the heads of other federal agencies as appropriate to conduct investigations of violations of any authorization, order, mitigation measure, regulation, or prohibition issued under this Act. 2. Actions by designees. In conducting investigations described in paragraph 1, designated officers or employees of federal agencies described to that paragraph may, to the extent necessary or appropriate to enforce this act, exercise such authority as is conferred upon them by any other federal law, subject to policies and procedures approved by the Attorney General. B. Permitted activities. Officers and employees of agencies authorized to conduct investigations under subsection A may 1. Inspect, search, detain, seize, or impose temporary denial orders with respect to items in any form or conveyances in which it is believed that items that have been, are being, or are about to be imported into the United States are in violation of this act or any other applicable federal law. 2. Require, inspect, and obtain books, records, and any other information from any person subject to the provisions of this act or other applicable federal law. 3. Administer oaths or affirmations and subpoena that require any person to appear and testify or to appear and produce books, records, and other writings or both. And 4. Obtain court orders and issue legal processes to the extent authorized under Chapters 119, 121, and 206 of Title 18 United States Code or any applicable federal law. Okay, what is this? Because again, they're not going to say what the code is that they're telling you to, do or not do. What they do, I'm learning how this works here. What they do is they just, hide it like that. Okay, so Title 18 United States Code, Main Criminal Code, deals with federal crimes and criminal procedure. Okay, so which one? Chapter 119, 121. Okay, chapter... Let's see if there's anything in there that's of great interest. Okay, so that's nothing that's too spicy. All right, back to the bill. Enforcement of subpoenas in the case of contumacy by or refusal to obey a subpoena issued to any person under subsection B3, a district court of the United States, after notice to such person in hearing, shall have jurisdiction to issue an order requiring such person to appear and give testimony or to appear and produce books, records, and other writings, regardless of format, that are the subject of the subpoena. Any failure to obey such order of the court may be punished by such court as a contempt thereof. D. Actions by the Attorney General. The Attorney General may bring an action in an appropriate District Court of the United States for appropriate relief, including declaratory and injunctive or divestment relief against any person who violates this act or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this act. In any such action, the limitations as described under Section 12b shall apply. Section 11, penalties. Here we go. Unlawful acts. 1. In general, it shall be unlawful for a person to violate, attempt to violate, conspire to violate, or cause a violation of any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this act, including any of the unlawful acts described in paragraph 2. Specific unlawful acts. Here's where it's going to get fun. The unlawful acts described in this paragraph are any of the following. No person may engage in any conduct prohibited by or contrary to or refrain from engaging in any conduct required by any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this act. B. No person may cause to aid, abet, counsel, command, induce, procure, permit, or approve the doing of any act prohibited by the omission of any act required by any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this act. C. No person may solicit or attempt a violation of any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or authorization directive issued under this Act. D. No person may conspire or act in concert with one or more other persons in any manner or for any purpose to bring about or to do any act that constitutes a violation of any regulation, order, direction, mitigation, measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this Act. E. No person may, whether directly or indirectly through any other person, make any false or misleading representation, statement, or certification, or falsify or conceal any material facts of the Department of Commerce, any official of any other executive department or agency, 1. In the course of the investigation or any other action subject to this Act, or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued thereunder, or 2. In connection with the preparation, submission, issuance, use, or maintenance of any report filed or required to be filed pursuant to this Act, or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued thereunder. F. No person may engage in any transaction or take any other action with intent to evade the provisions of this Act, or any other regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued thereunder. No person may engage in any transaction or take any other action with intent to evade the provisions of this Act, aka use a VPN. Here is, I think, this is the line. If I had to guess, this is the line where we're talking about, well, the thing that's been in the thumbnail of everybody's YouTube videos. Again, penalties, unlawful acts. So for, in the penalty section, they're describing unlawful acts, and they're talking about potential ways that you may be evading things. One of the main ways that you would ban, one of the main ways that you would evade a ban of a website is by using a VPN. As dev/random says in the live chat, this is something they've wanted to put in for the past 15 years. And because so many people don't like TikTok and they are mad at China, they are going to be able to sneak in a kind of ban on VPNs into this. Now, does it mean that a VPN in general is banned? No, it does not. However, if what it is that you are producing for people allows people to get around that, again, no person may conspire or act in a manner with another person in any manner for any purpose to bring about or to do any act that constitutes a violation of a regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization. So even if you're not advertising to people, hey, by the way, you guys can get on TikTok if you use my service, the simple use of a VPN, if the VPN is acting like a VPN and doing what a VPN is essentially supposed to be doing, then you are going to get in trouble, because a VPN by design is going to allow you to evade these types of bans. Again, if the VPN is actually doing what and providing the service that a VPN is supposed to provide. If I'm in a country that bans Netflix and I use a VPN that allows me to pretend I'm in America, then I can now use Netflix. Again, a VPN that does not allow me to evade a ban, that does not allow me to watch Netflix from that particular country, is a bad VPN. It's not doing what I wanted to do. If this actually does what, if that service actually does what it's supposed to do, you'll get penalized under this Act. G. No person may fail or refuse to comply with any reporting or record-keeping requirement of this Act, or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation, measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued thereof. And here we go, as if we didn't already have enough, as if AT&T wasn't already keeping location data on people for 30 years, as if there weren't enough logs and record-keeping at every internet service provider in America. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's just great. H. Except as specifically authorized in this subchapter, any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, or other authorization or directive issued thereother or in writing by the Department of Commerce, no person may alter any order, direction, mitigation measure, or other authorization directive issued under this Act or any related regulation. 3. Additional requirements. A. Continuation of effect. For purposes of paragraph 2E, any representation, statement, or certification made by any person shall be deemed to be continuing in effect until the person notifies the Department of Commerce or relevant executive department or agency in accordance with subparagraph B. B. Notification. Any person who makes a representation, statement, or certification to the Department of Commerce or any other official of any other executive department or any agency related to any order, direction, mitigation, measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this Act shall notify the Department of Commerce or the relevant executive department or agency in writing of any change of any material fact or intention from the previously represented, stated, or certified immediately upon receipt of any information that will lead to a reasonably prudent person to know that a change of material fact or intention had occurred or may occur in the future. B. Civil penalties. The Secretary may impose the following civil penalties on a person for each violation by that person of this Act or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation, measure, prohibition, or order, other authorization issued from this Act. Okay, so now we're at the part where this is how you're going to get in trouble if you wind up accessing something via a VPN, or allowing somebody to access something that has been had a mitigation measure or a prohibition put on it via a functioning VPN. 1. A fine of not more than $250,000 or an amount that is twice the value of the transaction that is the basis of the violation with respect to the penalty which penalty is imposed, whichever is greater. 2. Revocation of any mitigation measure or authorization issued under this Act to the person. C. Criminal penalties. In general, a person who willfully commits, willfully attempts to commit, or willfully conspires to commit, or aids and abets in the commission of an unlawful act described in subsection A, shall upon conviction be fined not more than $1 million, or if a natural person may be in prison for not more than 20 years, or both. You know what that means. Not more than 1 million means up to 1 million, right? You realize that not in prison for more than 20 years means in prison for up to 20 years, right? This is not a bad TikTok bill. This is bad. This is very, very, very bad. Contact your senator right now. Contact your House representative right now. Contact every single person that represents you at every form of government in your area and tell them that you will never vote for them again if this ever has the chance of seeing the light of day. This is dangerous. This is bad. This is not going to make America great. This is not going to fix anything. This is very, very, very bad. 2. Civil forfeiture. A. Forfeiture. In general, any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, used or intended to be used in any manner to commit or facilitate a violation or an attempted violation described in paragraph 1 shall be subject to forfeiture to the United States. 2. Proceeds. Any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, constituting or traceable to the gross proceeds taken, obtained, or retained in connection with, or as a result of the violation or attempted violation described in paragraph 1 shall be subject to forfeiture to the United States. You run a functioning VPN service. You run a functioning method that allows somebody to be able to access a social media network or a website that the Secretary of Commerce and his friends have decided is bad for America. You know what happens to you? Not only may you be going up to prison for up to 20 years, have up to $1 million taken away from you, but every single customer that has paid you all of the money that you ever made from providing a normal service might just be property of the United States now. Contact every single representative that represents you. Don't ask me how to do it. Google. You're all grown adults. You're adults. If you can figure out how to feed yourself and wipe your ass, you can figure out how to get the people that represent you to get rid of this bullshit before it gets passed into law. Keep in mind, I haven't even read the statement from the United States yet. I haven't even read the statement from the White House yet. We applaud the bipartisan group of senators led by Senator Warner and blah, 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 that introduced the Restrict Act. This legislation would empower the United States government. Oh, it certainly would empower the United States. The White House thinks this is a good thing. The White House thinks this is a good thing. This is bad. This has a chance of actually passing. Unlike an unfucked up right to repair bill, this actually has a chance of passing in a bipartisan way. B. Procedure. Seizures and forfeitures under this subsection shall be governed by the provisions of Chapter 46 of Title 18, United States Code related to civil forfeitures, except that such duties are imposed on the Secretary of Treasury under the customs laws described in Section 981 of Title 18, United States Code, shall be performed by such officers, agents, and other persons as may be designated for that purpose by the Secretary of Homeland Security of the Attorney General. 3. Criminal forfeiture. A. Forfeiture. Any person who is convicted under paragraph 1 shall, in addition to any other penalty, forfeit to the United States 1. Any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, used to or intended to be used in any manner to commit or facilitate the violation or attempted violation of paragraph 1. And 2. any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, constituting or traceable to the gross proceeds taken, obtained, or retained in connection with as a result of the violation. Procedure. The criminal forfeiture of property under this paragraph, including seizure and deposition of the property, and any related judicial proceeding, shall be governed by the provisions of Section 413 of the Controlled Substances Act, except subsections A and D of that section. Section 12, Judicial Review. A. Definition. In this section, the term classified information, 1, has the meaning given to the term in Section 1A of the Classified Information Procedures Act, 18 U.S.C. App, and 2 includes A. Any information or material that has been determined by the federal government pursuant to an executive order, statute, or regulation to require protection against unauthorized disclosure for reasons of national security, and B. Any restricted data as defined in Section 11 of the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. We're citing the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 and a banned TikTok bill. This has more red posts. This has more red flags than a post on r/2x chromosomes about a relationship. Administrative and judicial review. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, actions taken by the President and the Secretary and the findings of the President and the Secretary under this Act shall not be subject to administrative review or judicial review in any federal court, except as otherwise provided in this section. Actions taken by the Secretary under this Act shall not be subject to Sections 551, 553, 559, and 701 through 707 of Title V United States Code. Okay, what are these of Title V? Okay, let's take a look. We're going to look these up individually because it doesn't tell me what those are, and I have a feeling that there's some reason that that's important. Let's take a look and see. What does that mean? Because again, I'm not going to make any assumptions as to what any of this means. We're going to look it up piece by piece because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I'll be honest with you. I have no clue. That's why we're going to read and figure out. We are not going to make any assumptions here. We are going to read it and figure out what it means. Each one. Okay, so code 551. What is 551 about? Okay, this is about communication. This is a bunch of definitions. It is a bunch of definitions. However, all these definitions doesn't actually say what it means. Try this again. Bruh. Okay, this is... The public is entitled to the fullest practical information regarding the decision-making process of the federal government. It is the purpose of this act to provide the public with such information while protecting the rights of individuals and the ability of the government to carry out its responsibilities. This sounds like freedom of information requests. That's what this sounds like. So this sounds like freedom of information requests. That's what this is. And this says that this act shall not be subject to sections 553 through 559 and 701 and through 707 of Title V. What Section 553 says, and I quote, "It is hereby declared to the policy of the United States that the public is entitled to the fullest practicable information regarding the decision-making process of the federal government. It is the purpose of this act to provide the public with such information while protecting the rights of individuals and the ability of the government to carry out its responsibilities." So what it's saying is that this act is not subject to Section 551, 553 through 559, and Section 701 through 707 of Title V United States Code, aka freedom of information requests. That's what this is saying. Again, I'm not a lawyer. If you are a lawyer, please do correct me. What this is saying is that we have laws that have been passed to try and limit the influence that lobbyists and corporations have over our government. Those do not apply to this. We have laws that allow the citizens of the country to be able to ask for information from their government regarding decision-making processes, to be able to get access to documents and things that, they kind of paid for as taxpayers, to understand how the government is making their decisions. And that piece, that doesn't apply here either. This is horrible, horrible, horrible legislation. Make sure that anybody that voted for this, make sure that anybody that introduced this never gets into office again. Put aside your aggravations. Put aside the Democrat versus Republican stuff. Put aside your petty issues and grievances with the people you don't like. Anybody that introduced this piece of legislation, anybody that supports it in its current form, should never, ever, ever be allowed in the halls of power again in the United States of America. C. Petitions. 1. In general, not later. C. Petitions. In general, not later than 60 days after the Secretary takes action under Section 3A or the President takes action under Section 4C. An aggrieved person may apply for review by filing a petition for review in the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. 2. Standard of review. The court shall not disturb any action taken by the Secretary under Section 3A or by the President under Section 4C, unless the petitioner demonstrates that the action is unconstitutional or in patent violation of a clear and mandatory statutory command. D. Exclusive jurisdiction. The United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit shall have an exclusive jurisdiction over claims arising under this Act against the United States, any executive department or agency, or any component or official of an executive department or agency, subject to review by the Supreme Court of the United States under Section 1254 of Title 28 United States Code. E. Administrative record and procedure. 1. In general, the procedures described in this subsection shall apply to the review of petition for review under this section. 2. Filing of record. The United States shall file with the court an administrative record, which shall consist of the information that the appropriate official relied upon in taking a final action under this Act. 3. Unclassified, non-privileged information. All unclassified information contained in the administrative record filed pursuant to the paragraph 2 that is not otherwise privileged or subject to statutory protections shall be provided to the petitioner with appropriate protections for any privileged or confidential trade secrets and commercial or financial information. 4. In camera and ex parte review, the following information may be included in the administrative record and shall be submitted only to the court ex parte and in camera. A. Sensitive security information is defined by Section 1520.5 of Title 49, Code of Federal Regulations. B. Privileged law enforcement information. C. Information obtained or derived from any activity authorized under the Foreign Intelligence Service Act of 1978, except that with respect to information, subsections, blah, 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 blah. Oh my God. Okay, so you know what? If all of this, look at all the stuff that doesn't apply. Okay, what is Section 706 of this? Let's look at more stuff. You know what? I'm not going to search for all of these because it's going to be like I'm going to be up until 4 in the morning at this rate going through all this. Let's just see what this is. Okay. Section 706. Where is Section 706 of this? Any information concerning a United States person acquired under Section 1881A of this title should not be used as evidence against that United States person pursuant to paragraph 1 in any criminal proceeding. Okay, so this, I specifically want Section 706 though. Where is Section 706? I have Spectrum Internet. Fuck me in the ass. Jesus. Fuck me in the ass. Watching Spectrum try to load a web page kills me. Oh my God. Load the web page, bro. Oh, fuck you. Okay, we'll try another one. Let's try this one. Oh, that's it. It's a .gov website. Of course it's not going to load properly. Okay, we'll try this one. Here we go. 706. Oh, that's some fine print. Section 706 of such act shall continue to apply to an acquisition conducted under Section 702 or so. Wait. No, that doesn't seem like it. This seems like it, but I can't. Damn it. Why do none of these websites load? Oh, wow. This is actually where I find it. That's crazy. Okay. Interesting. So, okay, I have a direct link. Okay, well, instead of going through 7, let me see something here. Okay, let's try an easier one. We'll try an easier one. Notice any link for intelligence.senate.gov literally doesn't work. I wonder if this is because a bunch of other people similar to me are searching for this, and their website is getting so many requests as a result of everybody Googling that nobody can actually reach it anymore. Information acquired from an electronic surveillance conducted pursuant to the subchapter containing any United States person may be used and disclosed by federal government officers without the consent of the United States person in accordance with the minimization procedures required by this chapter. No otherwise privileged communication obtained in accordance with a violation shall lose its privileged character. No information from electronic surveillance pursuant to the subchapter may be used and disclosed by federal This seems like a double negative. So section 106 of that. Which section is this? 106. Okay, you know what? I'll just give him that one. My brain is kind of fried. Information subject to privilege or protections under any other provision of law, including the Currency and Foreign Transactions Reporting Act of 1970. Information under seal. Any information that is part... I heard without the consent, says Ayanda. Yeah. I'm honestly just going to give him that one because I'm kind of falling asleep at this point. Information under seal. Any information that is part of the administrative record filed ex parte and in camera under paragraph 4 or cited by the court in a decision shall be treated by the court consistent with the provisions of this section. In no event shall such information be released to the petitioner or as part of the public record. Return. After the expiration of the time to seek further review or the conclusion of further proceedings, the court shall return the administrative record, including any and all copies to the United States. F. Exclusive remedy. A determination by the court under this section shall be the exclusive judicial remedy for any claim described in this section against the United States, any executive department or agency, or any component or official of any such executive department or agency. G. Rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed as limiting, superseding, or preventing the innovation of any privileges or defenses that are otherwise available at law or in equity to protect against the disclosure of information. Section 13, relationship to other laws. A. In general, except as expressly provided herein, nothing in this act shall be construed to alter or affect any other authority, process, regulation, investigation, enforcement measure, or review provided by or established under any other provision of federal law, including the Federal Acquisition Regulation or the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or any other authority of the President or Congress under the Constitution of the United States. B. Relationship to Section 721 of the Defense Production Act of 1950. 1. In general, notwithstanding Sections 721D, 4B of the Defense Production Act of 1950, nothing of this act shall prevent or preclude the President of the Committee of Foreign Investment in the United States from exercising any authority under Section 721 of the Defense Production Act. Authority of the President. The President may not exercise any authority under Section 4 with respect to a covered holding that directly resulted from a transaction if A. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States reviewed the transaction or a broader transaction that included a transaction as a covered transaction as defined in Section 721A4 of the Defense Production Act of 1950, 50 U.S.C. 4565, A4, and its implementing regulations, and B. under Section 721 of the Defense Production Act of 1950. 1. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States cleared the transaction and notified the parties to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States completed all action with respect to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction. What? The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States cleared the transaction and notified the parties to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States completed all action with respect to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction or... Who writes this, bro? Who is this, Dr. Seuss? Like, what the Are you serious? One more time. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States cleared the transaction and notified the parties to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States completed all action with respect to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction. Yeah, that's a Dr. Seuss book right there. 2. The President announced a decision declining to take action with respect to the transaction or a broader transaction that included the transaction. 3. Coordination. No, that's me making edit notes for later, Eric B., because there's no way in fuck I'm redoing this video. So when there's a point that I want to be able to see for the video I post to the main channel, I just look at my little audio and video clip in my editor and I see the taps in the microphone, and the taps in the microphone, which I can see in the audio track, are the parts that I cut for the main channel video. Because again, no way in hell I'm firing a full-time editor for this shit. The President announced a decision declining to take action with respect to the transaction or broader transaction that included the transaction. 3. Coordination. The Secretary shall address coordination with respect to review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States in implementing the procedures under this Act. C. Limitation of authority of the Secretary. The Secretary may not initiate a review of any transaction that involves the acquisition of an information and communications technology product or service by a United States person as a party to a transaction. 1. Authorized under a United States governmental industry security program, or 2, to meet an articulable national security or law enforcement requirement. Section 14, transition. All delegations, rules and regulations, orders, determinations, licenses, or other forms of administrative action taken by the Secretary made, issued, conducted, or allowed to become effective under Executive Order 13873 of May 19, 2019, and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S. Code 1701, including regulations issued under Part 7 of Subtitle A of Title 15, Code of Federal Regulations, are in effect as of the date of enactment of this Act, shall continue in effect according to their terms, and as if made, issued, conducted, or allowed to become effective pursuant to this authority of this Act, until modified, superseded, set aside, or revoked under the authority of this Act, without regard to any restriction or limitation under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. 50, United States Code 1701, Section 15, miscellaneous. A. Paperwork Reduction Act. Paperwork Reduction Act. They wrote 55 pages of trash and they included Paperwork Reduction Act. The requirements of Chapter 35 of Title 44, United States Code, commonly referred to as the Paperwork Reduction Act, shall not apply to any action by the Secretary to implement this Act. Of course not, because if the Paperwork Reduction Act were applied to this, we wouldn't be reading 55 pages of bullshit at 1 a.m. on a fucking Wednesday to try to avoid the internet from falling apart. If the Paperwork Reduction Act applied to this, we wouldn't have 55 pages of shit to read, would we? Appointment of candidates. To expedite the ability of the Secretary to implement this Act, the Secretary may appoint, without regard to the provisions Sections 3309 through 3318 of Title V, Section Code, candidates directly to positions in the competitive service as defined in Section 212 of that title. C. Administrative procedures. Except with respect to a civil penalty imposed pursuant to Section 9B of this Act, the functions exercised under this Act shall not be subject to Sections 551, 553 through 559, and 701 through 706 of Title V United States Code. Okay, remember what those were? This was the whole Freedom of Information Act stuff. So this is related to you, the citizen of the United States, being able to understand what your government is actually doing. So when it comes to administrative procedures, except with respect to a civil penalty imposed pursuant to section this, the functions exercised under this Act shall not be subject to sections of U.S. Code that refer to you as a citizen being able to understand what your government is doing. That's what this is. That's what this is. This is a smack in the face to your rights as an American. protected information in civil actions. And also, by the way, another thing here, the lack of the freedom of information request kind of stuff, this means that if they do something screwed up, you may not know about it. You may not even know who's accountable or responsible, and you won't have the means to figure out who is accountable or responsible if a bad decision is made. It's not even that this is bad legislation that can be abused. It's that you may not even know who is abusing it, so you don't even know who to kick out of office. You don't know who to punish. You don't know who to hold accountable. This is horrible. You realize, you see this from like top to bottom, right? This is genuinely horrible. D, protected information in civil actions. If a civil action challenging an action or finding under this act is brought and the court determines that protected information in the administrative record, including classified or other information subject to privilege or protections under any provision of this law, is necessary to resolve the action, that information shall be submitted ex parte and in camera to the court, and the court shall maintain that information under seal. This subsection does not confer or imply any right to judicial review. Yeah, of course. Why would we want judicial review? Why would we want accountability in anything that we're doing here? Of course we don't want accountability. That's the point. E, applicability of the use of information provisions. The use of the information provisions of sections 106, 305, 405, and 706 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 shall not apply in a civil action brought against this act. Applicability of use of information provisions. Let's read that again. The use of information provisions of sections 106, 305, 405, and 706 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 shall not apply in a civil action brought under this act. It gets worse. It actually gets worse. F, no right of access. 1, in general, no provision of this act shall be construed to create a right to obtain access to information in the possession of the federal government that was considered in making a determination under this act that a transaction is a covered transaction or interest, or to prohibit, mitigate, or take action against a covered transaction or interest, including any classified national security information or sensitive but unclassified information. So again, somebody's going to say, well, yeah, he just can't give you access to classified information. Or sensitive but unclassified information. What's sensitive? Who defines what's sensitive? And why don't I get to know? Inapplicability of FOIA. You better put this in the main channel video, you fuck. Inapplicability of FOIA. Any information submitted to the federal government by a party to a covered transaction in accordance with this act, as well as any information the federal government may create relating to review of the covered transaction, is exempt from disclosure under Section 552 of Title V United States Code, commonly referred to as the Freedom of Information Act. I shouldn't be laughing. But you realize this has bipartisan support. The chances of this passing are very high. The White House likes this. We applaud the bipartisan group of senators led by Senator Warner and Thune, who today introduced the Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats That Risk Information and Communications Technology Act. This has a chance of passing. This is not like a right to repair bill where the chance of it passing is 0.5% and Lewis really cheers it on but knows it's going to fail. This actually has a chance of becoming law in the United States of America. We need to stop this from happening. Section 616, severability. If any provision of this act or the application of such provision to any person or circumstance is held to be invalid, the remainder of this act and the application of the remaining provisions of this act to any person or circumstance shall not be affected. Section 17, authorization of appropriations. There are authorized to be appropriated such sums as may be necessary to carry out this act. The end. In conclusion, I dislike TikTok, and I don't like using TikTok. If you created a bill that said that TikTok is banned, there are circumstances under which I could get behind a TikTok ban. TikTok is from a foreign adversary, and it is spyware. It's worse than Google. Like it's worse than the type of spyware that we have allowed to become commonplace in our personal lives, and it is bad. It's just, I have no problem with that being banned. This is not a TikTok ban. This goes a lot further than a TikTok ban. There are a lot of provisions in this so that this can be used for a lot more than just banning TikTok. It can be used to ban willy-nilly things that we don't like. More importantly, the measures that can be used to get around this ban are measures that we use in many other elements of our lives to ensure that we have privacy, to ensure that we can do things like just get around region blocks and geofencing on movie sites and stuff like that, things that we use every single day. In prison for up to 20 years, fines of up to $1 million, and lastly, no accountability. Firstly, we have sections of United States Code relating to how lobbyists have control over our legislature and trying to reduce the control and influence that lobbyists have over our legislature. This act states explicitly that those sections of United States Code that have been there for over a decade get tossed out the window. The Freedom of Information Act gets tossed out the window. So we have high penalties, broad ability for abuse, depending on who is in office and what it is that they don't like, and a complete lack of accountability or transparency. This is not a ban TikTok bill. This is Patriot Act 2.0. Everything that they wish they probably could have gotten in 10 or 20 years ago but weren't able to sneak in there, they are now sneaking in there now. And dare I say it, they're not sneaking it in there because this bill is public, and anybody who wishes to, even anybody with a dial-up internet connection if they had, can download this PDF and read through the entirety of it. And anybody, if they have access to the internet, if they have access to communications devices that allow them to view the video that I have put on this platform, whether this is on YouTube or Odyssey or Rumble, if you have the means to be able to access this video, you have the means to figure out who your local congressperson and senator is and ensure that they know that you will vote for their opposition if they vote for this bill. That regardless of what your aggravations are with the other party, regardless of what your aggravations are on other issues, let them know that if they let this go through, in this form, if they continue to support it, regardless of who runs against them, a carrot could run against them. You will vote for the carrot, just to avoid them being elected to another term. That is the only way these people will believe that there are consequences to their actions, if we let them know, and after we let them know, we actually act on it. We do what we say we're going to do. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.